Coming up on episode 100 of the Behind the Back podcast, we finally made it. And guys, what's this? Ben is right here in this room with me. We have a brand new studio that we are going to be revealing. Stay tuned so you can get a full picture of the room. Kind of can't get the angle right now that we want, but it's episode 100. We did something special. We are in the room. The Behind the Back podcast has changed. And this week we are talking about we're making our AFC predictions for the 2025 season. We go through every division, every team, what the records are, and why we think they're going to be that way. And then we go over what our playoff seeding is going to be in the AFC, guys. So with that being said, y'all, let's get it. All right. Welcome back to another episode of the Behind the Back podcast. We are your hosts. I am Marcos Conan Negron, and beside me here in person for the first time, Ben the Jet Reds. Ben, we're here together in our new studio. How are you feeling, brother?
You know, after 15 years of friendship, it's so good to finally be in person and see you in person. You know, I've never met you up until this moment, so it's really nice. No, this is a fun moment for us. I think as far as the podcast goes, this is exciting. This was something that you and I had envisioned. Yeah, man, we did it.
Yeah, that's right. So yeah, we'll throw it up here, a picture of the pod room for you guys. We can't get the angles we want just yet, but we'll work on that. We're developing as we go here. But we're working towards this and really wanting to, make something special for episode 100. And it took some time to get this plan together. Like we spent months of planning and just trying to find the right time to get it set up. And we thought it was all going to work out here on episode 100. So thank you guys. If this is the first time on the Behind the Back podcast, welcome. This is the new way of doing it. We didn't always have it this way before. So, we hope you enjoy the new experience as we learn. And, now we get to bicker with each other in person here. So it's going to be a lot of fire in here. So we're excited for it. So let's start with what we're actually here for. So it's episode 100, everybody. We're really excited for it. But now it's the AFC prediction pod. It's our prediction week, part 1. Next week we got NFC, as we do every year. This is year 3 of us making our predictions, and we go through every team, and we go through the playoffs, and we decide who's going to win this year. Last year I was accurate in terms of the Eagles winning the Super Bowl, obviously. So now let's see if we can go 2 for 2 this year. So we're going to start in the AFC. Ben, we're going to start in the AFC South, the most fun division, I think, in the NFL to talk about right now. So how we're going to do this is we're going to rattle off our 4 teams just in order, right? We're going to go in order of who we thought, first to worst, or actually we'll go worst to best, and make sure we're going to rally off of each other. I'm going to say mine, then he's going to say his, and then we're going to see where we differ and argue from there. So, the AFC South.
All right. AFC South, number 1, I've got the Houston Texans.
Okay.
Number 2, I got the Jacksonville Jaguars. 3, I've got the Colts. And 4, I've got the Titans.
What are your records for them?
So, I got the Texans at 10-7. I've got the Jags at 9-8. I've got the Colts at 5-12, and I've got the Titans at 3-14.
Okay. So we have the exact same. I have Houston first, Jacksonville second, Indy and Tennessee are tied in mine. I have Houston winning at 11-6, Jacksonville at 10-7. So we were just one off there for both of them. India had 6-11, and so did Tennessee. I actually think Tennessee is going to be slightly better than what we think this year. But I know
that's fair.
I know in this exercise we get some random casualties because we did the Pro Football Network, playoff predictors. So we literally sat there and picked every single game for the NFL season. And sometimes when you're just rattling off every game, you don't actually think like, oh, this team's record's 2-11 right now. I don't know if that's actually going to be the case. So that's funny. So okay, walk me through why you think Houston's going to win this year.
So I mean, Houston. It's not necessarily a lot to do with Houston so much as it is like the rest of the division, right?
Yeah.
Houston's kind of got this division on lock, and they've had it on lock now for a while. Obviously, CJ Stroud didn't take the leap most expected him to last year. Will he this year? That's kind of the question that I'm fumbling around in my mind. I believe he will. I feel like you kind of can't get worse than what you put on the field last year in a lot of ways. So the offensive line for them is questionable, and past, Nico Collins, I'm not sure who you can really say is considered a true weapon for them. But defensively, they'll be fine. Their secondary will help a ton with their downfield presence. Playoff team, most likely. Contender, that leaves the question for me.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, last year they made it to the divisional round after beating the Chargers in that first round. So I think, and also Nico Collins is coming back from a pretty major injury too.
Right.
And I think, they got Christian Kirk. Obviously, Stephon Diggs is in New England now. So, and now they, Joe Mason's still recovering from injury. They have Nick Chubb. So it's like, they have some interesting weapons, and we'll see when Tank Bell comes back too. So it's like they have pieces, but they haven't been healthy. And you're right, their O-line was garbage last year.
Yeah.
So, a lot of those guys kind of left and they kind of just remodeled it. So we'll see if that holds up. But I agree with you. I do think they get the benefit of being in the division they're in. And I like D'Amico as a coach. I like CJ. I think they're both the best QB coach combo in this division. And I think it makes sense for why Houston would be number one. I was wrestling with putting Jacksonville in there because I feel pretty high on Jacksonville this year.
That's interesting because I'm not that high on Jacksonville. Like I've always thought Trevor Lawrence is a good quarterback, but I don't think he's elite. I don't think he has that elite part to him, and it could be the situation around him. And I think that has a major part to do with it. But biggest thing this offseason that they did was get Travis Hunter, which was a great pickup, right? But like, he's going to be the story. His utilization is going to be something to watch. Like, how much does he get on offense and defense? If I had to guess, I would say offensively he gets 60% to 40 on defense. And then that'll probably, it'll probably level out, not evenly, but you'll figure out where you need him more towards the end of the season. And you'll kind of see him be utilized most there. But this Jacksonville team, man, it's been so many years of just subpar for me. Like, they had one really good season, or a good season. Aside from that, I'm just I don't like this Jags team that much.
That's fair. In terms of proving that they've been a well-run organization, that hasn't been the case. You're right. And I do think with this new regime, James Gladstone and Liam Cohn, I think Liam Cohn is going to be interesting. I think he comes from he comes from the Dave Canales tree.
Yeah.
Was there in Tampa last year, Liam Cohn, for Baker's offensive coordinator, and Baker had a breakout year. I think that he'll be able to instill an offense that's a little bit more suitable for Trevor's strengths, because Doug Peterson didn't do him any favors, and neither did Urban Meyer during that toxic year. So I do think it is mainly situational for him, and he's kind of been unlucky with some, bad injuries and the concussion last year off that dirty hit, by Al-Shire. It was a little tough for Lawrence. And now I think, not just Hunter, but Brian Thomas Jr. is a really good receiver. He broke out last year as a rookie. I think he can build off of that. And they have, they're really excited about their young tight end, Brenton Strange, taking over for Evan Ingram, who was there. So and not to mention they have Tank Bigsby and Travis Etienne in the backfield too. They have good weapons. That their offense, I think, with a better play caller like Liam Cohn, obviously he still needs to prove that he's a good head coach. But I think you saw it in the preseason, just those few games in the preseason, Trevor looked much more comfortable and the offense ran a little bit smoother. I think that just that for Jacksonville, I think it's gonna help them, because I think their offense stalling in a lot of these games last year was the issue that they lost. So I think that would be enough of a difference for me.
Well, and I think this is the season to kind of turn things around too, because you have an easier strength to schedule. I think they're 6th easiest right now. You can double check that.
I'm gonna pull that up. I have them right up here. Yes, 6th easiest.
So they this is the year to kind of solidify yourself, as a team and really kind of put yourself on the map, right? This is a good opportunity, I think, for Trevor, a good opportunity for Liam. And a good opportunity for this young guy in Travis Hunter to really establish himself as an NFL player and kind of find his identity. So it's going to be a fun story. This is going to be a fun team to watch. I'm not sold that they're going to be that good. I think they're going to benefit a lot from their schedule.
That's fair. And it's going to be a good bounce back year for them. Hopefully, I think that's why I have them, competing for a playoff spot. I think in the scenario, if I remember correctly, at 10-7, they still missed the playoffs on my bracket. So it was a tightly contested race in the AFC. but it was I think so. I'm gonna have to double check, but I'm pretty sure I had them off in this one. So yeah, so I did. Um, but I still think they're gonna be a good team and making competitive, and I do think they'll compete with Houston because I'm unsure about, like, we Houston has the good, good bones as a team, and they've had the proven track record these past couple years with CJ, but, like, I am a little bit nervous about can they stay healthy enough to manage, and protect CJ. So that it's gonna be I think Jacksonville's gonna be right there with them this year in a way that Jacksonville has started off pretty well in the past couple of years, but then they
Yeah.
always fizzled out because of injury. I think this year, though, Jacksonville's gonna stay in the hunt.
So do we want to talk about this Colts situation?
Have to.
Because
We have to.
you know what frustrates me? Like, so again, I have the Colts going 5-12. And that's a little rude, probably, because there's talent on this team. The problem is I think they're making a massive mistake.
Mhm.
They're benching Anthony Richardson
Mhm.
for
Danny Dimes.
Danny Dimes. And I'm thinking in my head, like, Anthony Richardson is younger than so many of these guys.
Mhm.
Even some guys are going into their first years. It's like it's kind of shocking to me that you would give up, on a guy that early in his career. Mind you, 49ers did that with Trey Lance, right?
Right, I thought about that.
But this situation seems kind of crazy because it was one thing when Brock Purdy stepped on the field and took over. It's another when, Danny Dimes gets there this offseason and he starts learning the playbook. That quickly you're going to bench Anthony and say Danny's our guy. I'm wondering, are they seeing – I haven't paid close attention to the Colts. Are they seeing something that, like, Danny's really orchestrating that offense the way this is supposed to go? Looks like a well-oiled machine. I don't know, man. I liked what I saw from Anthony, last year. So it's frustrating.
I think Anthony had a really rough, like, career arc to start, and I don't think he was ever really put in a position to succeed. I think everyone knew, and, like, the media and all the fans were okay with the fact that, like, yeah, Anthony Richardson, we're taking him at 4 overall, but he is more of a project player. That was his stat, was like he had the least amount of experience, starting experience for a guy drafted in the top 5. So I think it's
Right.
like I thought there was an expectation that there was going to be a longer leash on this guy, and he gets punished, for his incident of walking off the field, needing to take a breath from the play, and then it's discussed like he's giving up on his team, all that stuff. And the Danny Dimes thing was interesting. Daniel Jones got paid $14 million when he signed, so that wasn't like it wasn't like a normal backup number. That $14 million is a solid number for a guy you thought was going to be sitting behind Anthony Richardson, or if Anthony Richardson got hurt, yeah, they'll play some games for you. In training camp, I don't think there's been, from what I'm hearing out of Colts camp, there's that Anthony Richardson has been not that great, but Daniel Jones has not been that great. I mean, I watched a couple of preseason games. He wasn't that good. The offense wasn't that good. I'm really excited about Tyler Warren. I think he's going to be an awesome tight end. I think.
Yeah.
I think Shane Steichen's already finding ways to get him involved, and he's going to be involved like I would say slightly under like a Brock Bowers level this year for the Colts, because they don't have they have Josh Downs, Alec Pierce is a good deep threat. They have Michael Pittman too, but like I don't know. I don't know if Daniel Jones is going to be the guy getting the most out of that. And I know, in Shane Steichen's system, he can utilize a little RPO of Daniel Jones, just like Anthony Richardson, even though Richardson is much more dynamic. But yeah, I think they made a huge mistake. I think it kind of kills this whole. It's so weird to say we're admitting that we don't even like the pick that we made. Yeah, it's a weird. It's hard, and because of that, I just think I'm a vibes guy. I'm a QB Boys guy and a vibes guy. I think if the vibes are off somewhere, it affects a team longer than I saw it happen in the Supernatural fun with the Eagles, right? It's one of those things where once the vibes are bad, and we saw it with the Niners too, but the vibes are just lingering. The team kind of suffers for it, and I think Indies, they're just doing more harm than good for themselves.
So if you had to give a ceiling to the Colts, I don't want to spend a ton of time on them, but if you had to give a ceiling to them, my ceiling would be honestly 7 wins.
Same.
Okay.
Yeah, 7 wins. I don't think they like you said, they have good pieces, and I like what they have good pieces on both sides of the ball, but they haven't been a good team, and they've been competitive with worse, with Gardner Minshew, and they've had fill-in quarterbacks, but this is a dire situation for them. And again, this, everyone's going to want, now there's just pressure on Daniel Jones too. It's like, it's not an environment where he truly like won this job and like won the fan base. This isn't what happened. This is just a coaching decision. So now every throw, Danny Dimes, has an Indy, I think it's just going to be a toxic environment for both QBs, because in Indy's like was told that they're going to get a winner in some way, shape, or form. I don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah. So, all right. I got the Titans 3-14, like I said. This is another team I don't want to spend a ton of time on.
Totally fair.
They drafted Cam Ward #1 overall. I loved that pick. I thought it's a good pick. As far as quarterbacks were concerned, he was far and away the best quarterback of that class, and it kind of wasn't close. So not shocking that they took him, and you knew it was going to happen. The early signs show positive returns and future gains. So they have, the problem here is they have one of the hardest, if not the hardest, schedule in the NFL.
Yeah.
And it sucks, to be them right now, but it's kind of a casualty of what your division has to go through. With a re-energized Calvin Ridley and a wide receiver room that Cam believes in, and being one of the better ones in the NFL, it'll be interesting to see what they can do. But this to me feels like a building and development year for this squad. I think they're going to have to go through growing pains and a lot of some, tough losses here and there that, kind of you build on.
Yeah, there was a lot going on behind the scenes in Tennessee that like we weren't aware of as the public. For those who don't pay attention to the Titans, right? There was reports that Brian Callahan, they were thinking about letting him go and letting him be a one and done. And I think the fact that he gets to actually have a quarterback who's not going to be throwing pick sixes once every 25 throws, and Will Levis, Cam Ward, I think I was super impressed with everything I'm hearing in camp. And he has, he says he's saying a lot of, quirky things and making, I think he really is. I think the perception of Cam Ward has changed a little bit since the draft, because he was like the least hyped #1 pick in recent memory, right? So I don't think people were really seeing the #1 overall pick until training camp. But they see the way he interacts with the guys and the way he, is charismatic in these press conferences. They're like, okay, I see the #1 pick now. So I think now there's a little bit more faith in Tennessee. And yeah, they have, C+ weapons. Calvin Ridley's a great #2 on most teams.
Yeah.
But, for him to be your #1, I know Cam Ward's hyping up Gunnar Helm, the rookie tight end from Texas. They said he's been making a really good connection in the preseason. So that might be a connection to look out for a developmental standpoint early on for them. And they have Tony Pollard, Brian Callahan's system. They're going to be, this is derived from the Zach Taylor Bengals style. They're going to want to grip it and rip it. They're not going to focus on pounding you in the ground. So I think that, Cam Ward's going to get every opportunity to look impressive, and I think he's going to have his ups and downs, and that's going to be a product of the people he has around him, as well as him probably making a mental error here and there. But I like the Titans. I think they're going to be frisky, because I think their defense has veteran. They got L'Jarius Sneed back. He was coming back from an injury, so I think they're in a good spot. So they're going to be a fun team to watch. You'll have them on your one of your boxes. But I think that you want to pay attention to them now, especially after the preseason.
Ceiling 6 wins?
Probably. I think I had them at their ceiling. I think they could probably surprise, maybe go 7 or 8 if everything goes the way they are. Maybe Cam Ward is awesome, but I think the expectations are reasonable in Tennessee. I think kind of the pressure is off. Like Callahan can coach Ward, knowing that even if it's not the greatest year, he's going to be fine because they can build together at least for the next couple years.
I wonder what the odds are that Cam has like a similar season to like Bo Nix or Jaden Daniels.
I could see that. I think if I were to compare him, I think he's going to look more like Drake May. I think because of the weapons he has around him, he has good players, but he's not as set up. So I think there's going to be some ups and downs. I think if he gets another receiver or two in the coming years, maybe he impresses and they get a big time free agent, then we'll probably be seeing them a little bit differently. So let's move on. Now, that was a good AFC South. So let's move on to the AFC East. This is going to be this division's not as exciting, but we got the heavy dog here in the Buffalo Bills. So I'm going to start here. I'll name off my 4, then you go after. So I got the Buffalo Bills winning at 12-5. I got the New England Patriots going 10-7. I got the New York Jets going 6-11, and I got the Miami Dolphins going 4-13.
Wow.
What are your 4?
All right. So I got the Bills #1, 13-4. I've got the Patriots second at 9-8. I've got the Dolphins third at 7-10, and I've got the Jets at 5-12 at fourth. So I actually want to start on the Dolphins here for a minute. Marcos, why do you feel that the Dolphins are going to have this bad of a year?
I want to start off by reiterating the point earlier that I'm a vibes guy, and I think there's been, with all the Tua Tyreek drama, with Tyreek being kind of a menace in the offseason and bashing Tua and Mike McDaniels on Aiden Ross's streams or anything like that, and not to mention his own, domestic issues that he had back in April. I think it's just one of those things where not just Tyreek Hill, but you can see it in Mike McDaniel. You hear it in the reports, like Jalen Ramsey had an interview in Steelers camp, and he criticized Mike McDaniels and just the way that the team played. And it's just like you had players from the opposing, team questioning, if you practice the same as them. Yeah. And you look at Mike McDaniel, and I know that he's there and he's doing his job, but like he looks. If you saw Mike McDaniel when he first got into that job versus now, I think he looks checked out. I think the team. I think he's lost the locker room a little bit. I think Tua's, him and Tua are each other's biggest supporters, and I think that'll help him in the long run. If your franchise QB, will always have your back. But if you guys even start this season 2-5, 2-6, then there's going to be a real conversation about Mike McDaniel's probably getting let go if at the end of the season, or if not midseason, if the expectations are for this team to be good. It's not like they don't have pieces. I think, Tyreek, Jalen Waddle, that's always been great in theory, but those two never last the season. And I also think with all the injuries that they've had, Tyreek he's going to look good at first couple games. He'll be good because he's healthy. He's going to get hurt. His hamstring's going to get tight, and then he's just going to be a step slow the rest of the year. And they're not a tough team. And I don't know if that's just a Mike McDaniel thing, but every time, like they look fun in the summer, they look fun when it's all about speed and finesse. But then when the winter comes and it gets cold, you need to get rough and dirty, and you need to be stronger than the team in front of you. The Dolphins always lose.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, they look fun for the first 5, 6, 7 weeks of the season, and then you just kind of start to see them fizzle out. So yeah, to me, I feel like, and I agree with you, I think vibes are a massive part of a team's success throughout a season, especially in football. My part of this, is obviously Tua being one concussion away from what could be his last snap in the NFL. It's a little bit nerve-wracking knowing that, they don't have necessarily the best of offensive lines around him. They'll protect him to an extent, but he also doesn't do a lot to protect himself. And that's the part that makes me nervous with Tua, but he's had a great camp. During camp, he also called out Tyreek for his end of things, which I liked. It was an interesting way to do it, but I did like that he called him out and held him accountable. It showed the leadership in him that, he's clearly had throughout his career. How bought in is Tyreek Hill? And that's the question that I'm asking myself when I'm kind of going through these predictions with the Dolphins. And I did this exercise a few times. And one of them, the lowest I had them was 4 wins. And the 4 wins was taking into account, I actually predicted in that season that Mike would get fired and that they would be, coachless around week 7, week 8 and have to kind of rally throughout the season. And if that's the case, you can see a bad season like that, a 5-win, 4-win season easily with this group, because this group seems very dysfunctional at times. But as I'm looking up and down, like you said, there's so many pieces on this team that for me to kind of look at, especially offensively, what they have in those 3 guys, I can't look at them and say that they're anything less than a 5-win team.
Sure.
And so that's probably my floor for them. What I gave them was their ceiling, in my opinion. I think that 7-10 is probably their ceiling for this season. As far as their strength of schedule is concerned, they have the 9th easiest schedule.
And on top of that, they also have the 2nd most rest advantage days, plus 11. So only behind Detroit. So yeah, I agree. I do agree with your points that and not to mention their defensive front is actually pretty nasty now. Bradley
True.
Chubb's getting healthy. They have Chop Robinson. He's been a good young developing player, and then they have Julian Phillips, I believe, and Zach and Ziegler, I think is how I pronounce his last name. But they have they have ways to get physical up front. So maybe their defensive line might take a step this year that maybe helps them in a way that they haven't really had that kind of advantage before defensively. I'm worried about their cornerback room, obviously, with all the movement there. But I mean, if your defensive front can cause issues, that mitigates a little bit of that problem. But yeah, I don't know. I understand like 4-13 is probably more of a casualty type thing for me than I truly believe they're actually going to go 4-13. I probably think they're going to be more of like a 6 to 8 win team. It's probably where I have them, but I don't see it. Not to mention the teams that they play towards the end of the year, when it gets colder, it doesn't help either. So
that's true.
Where I sit with them.
So let's talk about our division winner, because this seems pretty clear. They've won, I think, 5 straight years now. The division, they've essentially had it on lock, and they look like they're probably going to do it again this year. The kind of a quick breakdown, like injuries are riddling their camp, very similar to what's going on with the 49ers. It's at wide receiver and it's in the secondary. Obviously the Niners have injuries all over, but the most hit groups are those 2 groups, and that's kind of concerning. But then you also got to think of who's throwing the football, and that's Josh Allen. He's also going to be running the football. He's a unit. He doesn't go down. He doesn't really get injured. He, in my opinion, should be the reason why you immediately lock the Bills for a playoff spot. And as far as how this division looks right now, we'll get into the Patriots here in a minute, who I believe, and I'm sure you believe, are the closest, competitor in this division. I still don't think it's necessarily that close. Josh, what he brings to a football team is, in as far as skill level and as far as leadership, is largely unmatched. So for me, like, their floor is 10-7, and that's still potentially a playoff spot depending on how this division shakes out. Offensively, they'll be good. Obviously Josh Allen, James Cook in the backfield. The wide receiver room is outside of Khalil Shakir. O-line is good with Deion Dawkins and Spencer Brown. Defensively, I think they'll be really good defensively. I think, adding Joey Bosa, you question how, what more does Joey have to give? I think in a new scenario and kind of a fresh situation, especially in Buffalo, I think Joey's going to do okay. I wonder what it's going to look like in the colder games when Buffalo gets a little chilly out there. But, as outside of that, on the opposite side, they got Greg Russo, right? So those two hold down the edges, and Greg's coming off 2 great seasons with the Bills and looking like a really good draft pick. So Christian Benford at cornerback, the seasoned vet in Matt Milano outside linebacker. Like, there's pieces up and down defensively. So I think this is definitely the team, to me, not just in this division, but potentially in the AFC, to look out for. And we'll have that discussion here in a little bit. But I like the Bills this year. Again, I gave them like a 13-4 record and I put them at their ceiling. That is definitely their ceiling for me.
Yeah. Because they have a tough schedule. I think that, they have a number 1 schedule. They get that every year. But I think that I agree. 12-5, 13-4, you could probably go either way with them. They are just a tier above everyone else in this division. I'd say 2 tiers at this point. But yeah, Josh Allen coming off his first MVP, was maybe a literal centimeter away from advancing to the Super Bowl. And, those are one of those things that, like, can he defeat his bugaboo? Because it doesn't matter right now. He does. He's had good playoff success, but it's the same with Lamar, right? Like, Lamar hasn't had as much playoff success, but like, they get to that next step. They've been kind of taking those steps, but they always run into Patrick Mahomes, right? So I don't think anything else matters. The Buffalo's probably gonna win the regular season game against Kansas City like they usually do, and then the question is that game going to be in Buffalo or Kansas City for that potential playoff?
And does it even matter?
Yeah,
because it's the bugaboo. Yeah. Like, can you get over that hurdle?
So I agree with you that the Buffalo, it's going to be another season of them needing to lean on the run game. I think they did a great job these past couple of years of I wouldn't say as aggressive as the Jalen Hurts treatment, but they did kind of do that with Allen because of the receivers he has around him. It's not because of Josh, it's because of the talent that unfortunately, they cannot provide him with. So Khalil Shakir is kind of his deep shot. Keon Coleman, we still don't know what he really
Right.
is. And they still have Dalton Kincaid. So it's not like they don't, and like I said, so they're gonna rely on their run game, and that's gonna be fine. Then if this defense can at least play up to the level and stay healthy, then they're gonna be fine. I know the rookie Maxwell Harrison's still dealing with an injury and won't be back anytime soon either. They're I'm I'm the obviously I think people are overreacting a little bit to that game against Chicago where, they got blown out 38-0. I know it's not nothing, but I do think, like I think that'll get short up by the regular season.
The only thing I'm taking out of that game, and I have to, and I think most fans do need to kind of look at this, is it says a lot about your depth at that point.
Mhm.
And not necessarily a lack of skill, but maybe a lack of togetherness. And that was a lot of what I saw in that Bills game. I think it was a lot of dysfunction of guys who don't see a lot of the field a lot of the time. They're battling injuries, like I said. So they've got guys out there who they had just brought into camp that hadn't really seen many runs. And I think that was a major factor, but I don't want to take too much out of that because they didn't play a lot of their starters.
Right.
And so it's hard to really gauge. Again, there's no right or wrong way to do preseason, especially in football. But it's hard to kind of gauge what that team is, when you don't play your starters. So
Yeah. So I think for the Bills, this is just going to be they're in a division that is very favorable for them as usual, and that's where you're going to see them stack a lot of their wins. And I think New England will give them the biggest fight out of any of the three teams in the division this year, at least for one of these games. But I think it's going to be pretty smooth sailing for them. And so long as they stay healthy, as long as they're a playoff team, they will always have a chance. So, it'll be interesting to see. But yeah, I think Buffalo, they're going to be a lot of people's Super Bowl pick this year, and for good reasons. So I think that, the roster is constructed. Maybe they can get another wide receiver via trade during the middle of the season. Maybe they can get lucky there. But I think for now, what they have is still going to be good enough to get them.
do we want to start talking about the Patriots since you brought them up?
Oh yeah, we got to talk about the Patriots. I think that'll be everyone's trendy pick to get better, and I don't blame them. I think that they got the second easiest schedule. They got some veteran talent in the building. They got to spend the most money in free agency.
Mhm.
So, and not to mention Mike Vrabel will give them a bump too. So I think that same with Drake May last year. The play calling for him wasn't that great. And I do think, Josh McDaniel,
Mhm.
say what you want about him as a, head coach. I think as an offensive coordinator, he's done a lot of good work with a lot of quarterbacks who have been worse than Drake May. So I'm excited about that on top of some of these young pieces that they're really excited about. Like in camp, they're talking about Efton Chisholm, that wide receiver who, small white guy, reminiscent of Wes Welker back in the day for the Patriots. Everyone's getting a little excited about him. And obviously Travion Henderson, their running back, who's already shown a lot of pop in what he can do, not just in camp, but in the game. So I think that's something that, it might have just turned into they might actually have some young guys who might actually be able to contribute with these vets that they brought in. So it's hard not to get excited about the Patriots. I think there's still going to be inconsistency in Drake's game because he's learning to play with all these new weapons, but it's hard not to like him.
I like this team, and I like the additions of this team that they made this offseason. I agree with you. I think Josh McDaniels, as far as a head coach, you question a lot of what he does and a lot of his tendencies. But as far as an offensive play scheme, when he was he has everything in his bag to run a competent offense, and I think Drake's going to benefit a lot from having a consistent offense. And I think that's something you can rely on with Josh. I like Josh as an offensive play caller. And I think that Vrabel's going to kind of keep him in check. I think, they're going to kind of lean on each other for things, but I think you're going to see Josh leaning on Vrabel a lot more as far as, kind of keeping him in check and making sure he's locked in and doing exactly what he needs to do. Vrabel immediately brings it's like a Saleh effect. He brings that defensive grit and mentality to the team immediately. So you can kind of assume that they're going to be, competent enough defensively to keep up with most teams. It does lie with, can Drake May take that step or that leap in his second year? And can he really benefit from the additions that they've made? Getting Stephon Diggs, I think, was a massive pickup for this team. Stephon and his pink pack of fun. Drafting T-Rex arm Will Campbell.
Yeah.
That, I think, while there's questions about it, I think it was a good pick.
Mhm.
And it solidifies that O-line a little bit more for them. So I like what they've done. And again, I have them going 9-8, and I'm not sure that that's their ceiling.
Mhm.
I'm also not sure that there's a floor to say.
Mhm.
If I genuinely, I want to say, like, the floor for me would be around 6 or 7 wins, and I want to say the ceiling is probably around 10 wins.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that is there's a lot of youth on this team, like you talked about, and they're going to be leaning on that youth. But if it can really come together and you can, find a rhythm, I think this team could be really fun to watch.
Oh, heck yeah. And I think the defense, it's going to take a second on the defense because I think they have something like 8 or 9 new starters on that
Yeah.
defense. And that includes Super Bowl champion Milton Williams. And, can he prove that he's the $100 million man that he signed up to be? And, you bring in guys like Spillane, you already have guys like Gonzalez. Like, defensively, they got dudes. And I think it'll be interesting to see, Mike Vrabel. I think now with the emergence of Travion Henderson in preseason, I also think now there's an element of, they might have 3 running backs that they can use and maybe alleviate some of that pressure off of Drake May too. So they really can say, hey, let's try to control the ground a little bit. And then, as a play caller, for those who study McDaniels, they always emphasize that he's kind of evolved into a play caller now that isn't afraid to just be, like, I wouldn't say simple or plain, but you're not going to get these like super exciting plays. You're going to get plays that helps the quarterback. You're
Mhm.
gonna make a quick decision, and it's going to be pretty easy for you, and you just got to make the throw type of style for McDaniels. It's not like a scheme like Shanahan where he's going to motion, get all this stuff open like that way. So I think that that's going to help Drake with the receivers that he has now just take a marginal improvement. And I think that'll be enough for them to get more wins.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm not sure if you mentioned it, but their strength of schedule is another reason to just believe that this is a year that they can kind of benefit on and grow upon. So, yeah, I'm excited for the Patriots. Let's talk real quickly about the sore team down there at the bottom in the Jets.
Yeah. I think they'll be frisky.
Do you?
I think they'll be frisky.
What was your record for them?
I have them at 6-11.
I do too.
Yeah.
I think Aaron Glenn has been running a tough camp, and the returns have been fairly positive. They've been leaning deeply on the run game for a majority of the season, and if they find an identity offensively, it's going to be interesting. The running back room, to me, is the shiny part.
It's nasty. Yeah.
Brees Hall, Braylon Allen, Isaiah Davis, like this, it's a nice room, and I think that early on, if you're able to lean on that and find success on the ground and then kind of incorporate the pass game around that, especially with Justin Fields, I like Justin.
Mhm.
I like Justin a lot. I think he's a good quarterback. I think he hasn't benefited whatsoever from a good situation.
Yeah.
He's been tossed into bad situation after bad situation. You can argue, obviously, the Pittsburgh situation was probably his best opportunity.
Mhm.
But even then, you didn't get much of a run time because, they wanted the cornball Russ to take over after, what was it, 4 games.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to see how quickly Justin Fields gets incorporated. But this team is going to be interesting. I think I do kind of agree. I think they'll be frisky. The question to me is, how quickly does this offense get going? Defensively, they still got some dogs out there. This is, you don't have Saleh, but you didn't have Saleh, and you were still a really good defensive team for the most part.
Mhm.
So I think there's everything to be said that they'll still be a good defensive team. It really does question for me the offense.
Yeah, and I think offensively, I do think that they are going to run into the issue. A couple weeks ago, on our bets portion that we did, I took the over on Justin Fields' 14 touchdown passes, and now based off of everything in camp with what they're saying and how they're trying to, what their identity really is, I think that they are confident in this young offensive line that they built. I think Fashanu and oh man, I forgot, and the Arbon Membo, who they
Membo,
drafted.
yeah.
They drafted him as well. Elijah Vera Tucker. Like, they have an offensive line now that Rodgers probably wished he had when he was there. Um, and this is an athletic young line that when you have a group that's a little bit younger and more athletic, you can utilize them in the ground game more. You can say, hey, go use your agility and go put someone on the ground. So I think they're going to be an extremely run heavy team, try to control possession, throw as little as possible and make it as easy for Justin as we can. Because if he just doesn't turn the ball over, then we'll be okay. It kind of feels a little bit like what the Eagles wanted to do, but I think Jalen Hurts is a much more reliable thrower. But I think Justin just hasn't been in a position to prove it, and I do think that he has a coach that is willing to tailor his system around him, and I think that'll at least get some production out of Justin Fields. So I like what they have. They still have good pieces. I like their running game. I like their line a little bit more, and obviously they have Garrett Wilson. Outside of that, they're relying on Mason Taylor, who did get hurt, which sucks because I actually liked him. So he doesn't really have any weapons to throw to. So really, I think we're going to see a lot of Brees Hall as a receiver too, and that's something he's really good at too. So I think that they're gonna have to get creative offensively, and I think because of that, their ceiling is only so high. Like they're not going to have the same juice as other teams.
Well, they need a big year out of Brees Hall. They can't have the kind of year that happened last year with him. They were 31st in rushing offense last year.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And you just can't have that, especially with a running back room that looks as good as this one does right now. I think you have every reason to be top 10, especially with the quarterback that you have in there. There's draw plays that you can call around Justin. So, I like this team. I do. The problem for me, and the reason I have them 6-11, is that tough schedule that they have run into. They don't have an easy one, and that's a large reason for me. Why I personally I just don't think this is necessarily the year that it's a growing year, it's a building year, but it's not a year that you can look at this team and say, they have a chance at the playoffs.
Absolutely, yeah. I think they'll be on the outside looking in, but I do think this will be these next 2 years will be a great chance for everyone in the NFL to see who Justin Fields is. And I think that'll be the experiment for the Jets. And I think Aaron Glenn's going to have a good career. Obviously, we have to see him as a coach to see what happens. But defensive-minded head coaches, I think so long as the defense looks really solid, then the question will be, okay, let's see, maybe we can get a better play caller in here. But outside of that, yeah, I don't see much for New York. But I think they'll be fun to watch. I think they're going to have good moments. But I don't know how much I trust them, for the length of the season.
Yeah.
All right. So I think that's good on the AFC East. Let's pivot on over to the AFC North. This division was once a powerhouse, and I think now, bits and pieces of it are starting to fall apart a little bit. But let's have you name off your four and their records.
So I've got the Ravens number 1, 12-5. I've got the Bengals number 2, 11-6. I've got the Steelers third at 10-7. And I've got the Browns fourth at 5-12.
Okay, well, yeah, I had to do a double take on that one.
Yeah.
You think the Steelers are going to go 10-7 this year? Okay, I want to hear about that.
So it starts with Tomlin, and it's always going to start with Tomlin. I think, you, for that reason, just having Mike Tomlin, you've got to lock him in for 6 wins. Okay. I'm banking on Aaron Rodgers staying healthy.
He was healthy last year.
He was. If he stays healthy this year, with the style of offense that they can start running with DK Metcalf now, there are pieces offensively that could look really good if they find a rhythm early, and it has to happen early.
Has to.
If they don't essentially come out week 1, week 2, maybe week 3, and are hitting almost on all cylinders, if you're not at that point, you're not going to get this record. This is definitely their ceiling, 10-7. I like this team, and defensively they're going to be solid. They've got pieces. There are pieces up and down the team. I think, the question is how, like I said, it's how quickly everyone really meshes together. And I think, rumors and everything I've heard, reports and everything say that Rodgers is actually having fun in camp. He's holding guys accountable. He yelled at his O-line about letting one of his other backup QBs get hit. It was like a whole thing. I read a small article on it, but he's enjoying football right now. And an Aaron Rodgers that enjoys football is kind of scary in a lot of ways.
Mhm.
I don't think he enjoyed football in any way, shape, or form when he was in New York. And I think the butt end years of Green Bay, you started to question if he even wanted to be there as well. So this is, I think, a lot of this take has to do with Aaron Rodgers. I started it with Tomlin, and I'm going to end it with Aaron Rodgers, and just assuming that this is kind of one of, if not the last year for Aaron.
Right.
And I think he's going to try and go out with the biggest bang that he can.
So I love everything you said there. And just to fill it in here, I had Baltimore 13-4, Cincy second 10-7, Pittsburgh I had 7-10, Cleveland I had 4-13. Who am I to fade Mike Tomlin, who hasn't missed the playoffs or finished with a below 500 record in 17 seasons. I don't want to say that I don't believe in Rodgers, but I believe in that defense, and that defense is always going to be good. And I really liked, the veterans that they added, Darius Slay and Jalen Ramsey, to that room that already had Joey Porter Jr. That's a stacked cornerback room.
Mhm.
So you all of a sudden have that on top of, you were able to pay TJ Watt and deal with that. Obviously, Cameron Hayward's trying to do his own thing right now and start whatever. But, you still have the bulk of your defensive front. So your defensive pieces are there. And I am interested to see how, this Rodgers Metcalf team looks. I think this offense lacks firepower. I think I don't think they have the same kind of pop. I don't know what their running situation is like, if who is it, Jalen Moore, and I think if that's who your bell cow is going to be, I'm not, I don't know if they have any other younger guys in the room. So that's something that I would just have to see it to believe a little bit.
If they had Najee still, it would be nasty.
Yeah,
I really do think it would be nasty.
I just think it's interesting that I think Rodgers played. Everyone says the season was bad. Statistically, he didn't have that horrible of a season, and it was a bad Jets team. There was a lot of turmoil and everything with that. And I also think that I wouldn't rule out the fact that Rodgers could just implode, by game, by week 5 or 6, the Steelers are 1-4, 1-5. His diva mode might start activating, and then he goes out on one last hurrah in a completely different way. And I don't think anybody rules. I think that's part of the reason people are kind of tuned into, because it could go that way. I think that world exists. But if we're keeping it half glass full, they have the defense to compete. It's just going to be a matter, like you said, if Rodgers can stay healthy, which he's proven he can. Especially last year, even at his age, he was able to stay healthy. So if he can do that and build some rapport with these guys and his skill position players stay healthy, I think there is a shot. But I also think they're it's like the reverse of the Bengals for me. It's and I still don't believe in the Bengals that much, and we'll talk about them in a second. But it's it's all defense and no offense for me.
Yeah.
I don't see where the consistent offense is going to come from Pittsburgh if you're telling me DK is your main number one receiver when all of DK's career he's had good supporting receivers around him and make his life a little easier too. So that's something I'm interested in. I know they have the 3 tight ends though. I know that Freiermuth, John Smith, and Darnell Washington are all kind of excited about. So that'll be an interesting thing to see how they kind of mix those guys. And maybe that's the key to unlocking the offense a little bit, because those guys can kind of create a different style. So maybe that'll be the way. And I wouldn't be surprised if Rodgers leans on the tight ends, but that'll be something, where they get their offense from is what I'm paying attention to this year.
Yeah, exactly. So let's talk Ravens. Okay. I had them 12-6. 12-5. You had them
13-4.
13-4.
Mm-hmm.
So they're seeking their 3rd consecutive division title. They should be considered the favorite. Prime DeLar and a scary Derrick Henry is, going to be once again the shoulder and the load of this offense, right? Mm-hmm. Consistency as a team is the part where I'm questioning, because last year and even the year before that, you saw a lot of these inconsistent things happen with this team. They would beat some of these really good teams, and then they would drop one, a clunker, and it's what happened there? Why do you have a top offense or a top defense and all of a sudden you can't put points on the board? All of a sudden you can't stop the run. All of a sudden you can't stop the throw. It was random. And you can say it was injuries, part of injuries. You can say it was this or that or the other thing. But what it isn't is it's not a lack of a lack of stability. That team is pretty stable up and down. They've been stable. Obviously, with Jim out there with Harbaugh, John Harbaugh.
Yeah.
Sorry, with John Harbaugh, like you come to rely on his scheme every single year. And so there's a stability there just in the way that he runs his team. So the consistency thing is the part that I'm kind of hung up on. And I rattled my brain on this. Do I want them being my AFC favorites? Do I want them being, a close second, a close third? How do I feel about this team? Defensively, they should be better this year. Seeing as towards the end of last year, the worries were brought on from early season breakdowns and letdowns, seemingly the smoothed out as the season went on, right? So we'll see what Zach Orr has in store for this defensive unit in year 2. But 12-5 for me feels like the ceiling. So 13-4,
I think that's a reasonable target. 12-5, 13-4. It's kind of the same as the Bills. You can tell me either one of them, that would be the result, and I think I totally believe it. I think 12-5 would still win them this division. I think not just. I agree that the issue with Baltimore was the inconsistency from the defense starting really poorly last year and then putting things together, and that led to a lot of things. Lamar had an amazing year. He had 43 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, and they kind of gave the Josh Allen okay, it's your turn MVP when if you're going strictly off of I get total TDs or a thing, but that's kind of the same thing for Lamar. So it's just I get you don't want Lamar to win that third MVP right then and there, and it made sense to give the Bills and Josh his. But I think Lamar, that offense is going to be just fine, and they added DeAndre Hopkins to the fold. Not that he is anything what he used to be, but I mean, if they get the version that's a possession guy while Zay Flowers stretches it, it's a decent core of guys, and then Mark Andrews is back, and obviously you have Derrick Henry. And they're really excited about, I forget it, Keaton Mitchell, I think is his name. Their running back who was hurt last year, but apparently had a lot of pop, and he's been popping off in the preseason. So they're excited to add him into the fold. So I think their defense, now that they added Malachi Starks to the fold, I really liked him coming out of the draft. I was, one of my Eagles targets going in there. I think him and Nate Wiggins, you got him, Kyle Hamilton, Roquan Smith. You have a defense now that I think has improved. So I think Baltimore's as safe of a bet as any team in the NFL. I think it's fair to put them there easily in the conversation for a top 3, top 4 at any time of the season.
Do you have their rest advantage?
Yeah,
because I know their strength of schedule. They're just below middle of the pack. It's not favorable per se.
Right. Their rest is they have a rest advantage of +5. They are first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh. They have the 7th, most rest advantage.
So that's
solid.
Good. Yeah.
Works in their favor. Out of all the AFC contenders, out of all the AFC contenders, they have the most. Only Kansas, Cincy has a +3. Kansas City has +2. Buffalo, where are you? Yeah, Buffalo's low. There it is. Buffalo has a decent rest disadvantage. They're -7th. They're 4th worst.
Ooh.
So they're going to have some interesting schedule things there too.
Yeah.
But I think, so for Baltimore, it's they've been a pinnacle of consistency in terms of regular season success. And I think this team, and we're seeing this, we see this with teams all the time, like the Chiefs. The Chiefs have won, so it kind of remedies it. But the Bills, the Ravens, even the Niners, the teams who are successful all the time and can get to the playoffs no matter what, it's an auto lock. And then you go deep into the season, and then you lose, and you consistently lose deep into the season. Now you get that fatigue of okay, we can get to the playoffs, so all we have to do is get there. And I think that we see some of these clunker performances where these guys are I'm not really 100% this week, or I don't really want to show up this week because all we have to do is make the playoffs. And I think there's an element of these teams that are consistently successful where it's hard not to get complacent, I think. So I think, there's an element of that I see, we see that every year. So I think it'll be interesting to see if, in teams like Detroit, that's another team to look out for in this instance too. You're going to keep making these deep playoff runs and have good teams, but can you get over the hump this time? And the Ravens are in the same exact spot as Buffalo. It's going to be who gets there first will be the one who defines their legacy sooner. So that'll be interesting.
Yeah, exactly.
So the Bengals, you have them 11-6, I have them at 10-7. I think they'll bounce back. They were 9-8 last year and barely missed the playoffs because they got off to a slow start. That's been their thing, right? They're playing Joe Burrow in the offense in the preseason. They're letting Joe Burrow get sacked a bunch in the preseason. So that's he cooked against Philly, but Commanders gave him a tougher time in terms of the pressure. So that's a little nerve-wracking a little bit. And their defense, Trey Hendrickson, it looks like now they're looking for trade partners instead of trying to figure something out. So this kind of turned into now kind of feel like Trey Hendrickson isn't coming back, so you lose. So now what for the defense? So it's just I feel like it's gonna be more in the same. And I think 10-7, I was generous. I almost wanted to put them in 9-8 again. I almost felt like they weren't going to, but I think because I do think I want to believe in the approach that they're taking this offseason and like playing them early or playing them in the preseason in an effort to be on lock once the season starts. I think will benefit this team in particular. I think we saw it in the preseason how clean Joe has looked and getting comfortable, obviously sacks aside and pressure aside, but I think that it will help them going into the regular season.
Yeah, Burrow being, in my opinion, I'll just say one of the best quarterbacks last year in particular. And just what I saw that offense do with those three guys in T and Chase and Burrow. It's hard for me to think that this team shouldn't bounce back. But they had those guys last year too. And it really did boil down to defense. And defensively, it's not that different than what it looked like. And it's that for me is kind of the part that concerns me. But with 4 of their first 6 games on the road, they're going to need to find ways to hide weaknesses in matchups and be somewhat serviceable on defense. If they're able to kind of lock in for the first stretch of the year, I think starting hot and not going 0-3 like you did last year is going to be a massive reason why you bounce back and go 10-7 or 11-6.
Yeah.
If you start cold, this team's going to end cold as well. And that's just due to kind of how their schedule shapes out. And that's due to kind of how you see this team play out as well. I think you could very well see guys get checked out with this team if they start out cold. And that's something I think you need to kind of watch for, because it's like when you play for a team that just makes continuous incompetent move after incompetent move, eventually you're just like, it's kind of like a Devontae Adams situation when he's out in the Raiders. It's like, I don't even want to be here. I don't even want to play right now.
Right.
Like, why am I here?
I think it's interesting. I think you made a great point with hiding weaknesses, because I think this year, I think the Bengals have I think they're going to have slightly more answers. I think they're going to rely on Chase Brown in the run game a little bit more. I think they like what they get out of him, and I think they're finally trusting him in a way that maybe it'll add a little bit of balance to the offense so that they can run play action a little bit more. I just think that I still don't I think they're going to have more offensive answers to mitigate the results the defense are going to give them this year. I don't think the defense is. Even if Shamar Stewart ends up being at a Trey Hendrickson level, they still had Trey Hendrickson last year, and they were still garbage. So, it does worry me, and that's why I do think that this preseason start, if them playing in the preseason means getting those, splitting the first 2 games early, even that would be enough. That would be the difference for them to sneak into the playoffs if their defense is atrocious as everyone thinks it's going to be. But who knows? Maybe that defense is middle of the pack defense, and if that defense is even middle of the pack, then we're talking about the Bengals as a 12-13 win team.
True.
Because their offense is probably the best in the league when it's going, especially if they figure out how to utilize the run game more.
Yeah, I fully agree. So I think starting hot is a big thing. And I think if you're able to hide weaknesses, you're able to, kind of lock in defensively and find a little bit more success. It really does boil down to they just need to be a little bit better defensively. And they're going to start winning a lot more of these games. They don't even need to be elite. If they had a elite defensive unit, dude, this team is easily a Super Bowl contender. So that's the part to me that just screams incompetence, because it's you're this close. You made it to the Super Bowl a few years ago.
Yep.
And you knew the team you had then. You know the structure to get back. The Eagles said it. You've seen the Chiefs said it. You just have to follow the same blueprint. But they just haven't done it. And this whole offseason has been it's been kind of weird vibes. Like that's something too. Like you're a big vibes guy. I understand the vibes. I've seen it. We've both seen it. That's something to consider as well.
Yeah, especially like maybe the vibes on offense are all good, but the part that's been the issue is your defense, and your defensive vibes are horrible based off of like Shamar Stewart cleaned it up once the money got in his pocket, but as soon as he not without drama to get there, and again, you're not paying your best defensive player, and I understand you don't want to commit a 5-year contract to a 30-year-old defensive end, like I get that. But like how serious is this window? And that's also the thing with the Bengals. Historically, they've just kind of been a team that does this. They don't pay their guys. Like they give a very Cowboys. They're the Cowboys of the NFC in terms of the AFC in terms of how they handle negotiations with their players.
Yeah.
And everyone always seems disappointed. So I just think it's interesting for the Bengals. I think if they need to get out of their own way. That's been the only thing preventing them. I think Joe Burrow winning that one year, getting them to the Super Bowl, kind of took a lot of pressure off. And he has kind of been coasting off of that because he's the only QB that beat Mahomes, and he was coasting off of that outside of in the AFC, I should say. Right. Obviously, we know what happened in the NFC, but it's one of those things that like Burrow has kind of been coasting off that, but he is also a great quarterback. But he also, because he does everything that everybody wants their golden boy quarterback to do, he also doesn't fall into the same bucket of the QB wins as a lot of these guys do. He gets away with, like, people are like, it's his defense letting him down. When he's throwing 49 touchdowns and almost 5,000 yards. Like, I get that argument. But, like, for what? You're doing all that for what? And it's not like everyone talks about weapons for all these other dudes. He's had the two best, one of the top 3 pairings in the NFL for the past since he's been there. So it's like,
sure.
So it's like it's not like he's ever had to deal with not as much talent or anything like that. He's always been good because his situation, his side of the ball, has always been good.
Well, and it's kind of opposite of our quarterbacks because when the Bengals are winning, Joe Burrow. It's all Joe Burrow. It's not anybody else. But when they're losing, it's not Joe Burrow. It's not his fault at all. I'm even guilty of doing that. I just did it.
Zach Taylor's a bum. Like,
right.
Yeah. It was annoying. So there's another. We'll talk. There's another QB I will have some beef to pick with here in a little bit. But I think that it's just if Burrow can get them to the playoffs, it'll quiet people up because I don't think the Bengals need to win the Super Bowl for them to be viewed as like, it's going to be like, wow, look at how far they made it with this garbage defense. Like, look at how far Joe Burrow was able to take them, and that'll only help him. So that's whatever.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, so let's talk about the Brownies, the Cleveland Browns. So
Joe Flacco.
They always said they were going to do this.
Yeah.
It wasn't like they were teasing us and saying, "Oh, you're this, Dylan Gabriel this." It was preseason that they were playing them. We obviously knew Joe Flacco wasn't playing in preseason, and they've been pretty open this whole time. Like, "Oh, Joe Flacco's QB1, and then we'll play it. We'll figure it out from there." Dylan Gabriel played pretty well against the Eagles. I think if Makuba didn't get that pick 6, it's a completely different conversation about Gabriel. He's competing a little bit closer with Shador, but I feel bad for all those guys. I think that it's like it's not a fun situation. Joe Flacco still thinks he's a competitive quarterback, and his numbers suggest that he can still sling it. Is it consistent? No, but then you have these rookies who are like, I'm going to get an opportunity. I don't know. So, this is kind of a F year for the Browns anyway. And not to mention, if they really don't want to stick with either one of these two guys, there's QBs next year, and they're going to be bad. They're going to get a crappy record, so they're going to have their pick of QBs next year. What if they look into Arch Manning next year at the number 1 pick? Are they just not going to take him? I think they're going to take him and just say, "Sorry, Shador, we're going to go with this nepotism baby Nepo baby we want to rock with." So I just, it's we don't need to really talk much about Cleveland. They got good young pieces. Mason Graham, Myles Garrett. I'm excited for that.
Yeah.
That's pretty much all I got for that.
Yeah, I with Flacco, like I laughed. I like Flacco a lot. I don't like him in the sense of he was the quarterback on the Ravens when the Niners lost the first of 3, last 3. But Flacco is interesting because what was it last year or the year before? He was on a cruise with his family. And then he's in the backyard and he's throwing footballs with his kids. And then, a week later, he's on an NFL roster out of nowhere. And here we are again. Basically, it's 40-year-old Flacco throwing to a bunch of kids. It might as well be his own kids. So
his own kids don't even think he's that good anyway.
Right. So Flacco is interesting. I don't think there's a wrong choice in the QB decision here with the Browns. I think
they should have went with one of those two young guys. That's just me though.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think you could have gone with Shador. I don't think he's ready.
Really? Okay.
I don't think he's ready. I think he was a lot of why he even got drafted in the first place had a lot to do with his name. But
that's an interesting take.
That's
fair.
We'll see how it pans out. I like Shador, and I'm actually rooting for Shador. While I say that, I feel like he's not ready, and I need to see a little bit more.
Sure.
But defensively, they're going to compete. They'll keep things interesting. I think at times, it has to be better than what it was last year, though.
Yeah,
you're not going to be the level you were 2 years ago. You simply don't have that unit anymore. But you can find ways to compete, and I think defensively is where it needs to start. It's just there's so many questions, so many concerns. It's hard for me to invest any stock in this team.
Yeah, and they have a top 5 harder schedule.
Yeah,
and a top 5 rest disadvantage in terms of. On the other side, they have one of the worst rest disadvantages. So, things aren't. It's not going to be Cleveland's year.
No,
but hopefully, I think the point that all fans are just waiting to get to is probably like week 6, week 7 when they're struggling, and it's like, all right, Flacco, sorry, like we're gonna need to see which one of these young guys can step up. We might get a few games of Shador and then a few games of Gabriel just to see maybe then it turns into that competition and see that gives Cleveland fans something to watch.
And I thought about that, and in my head I have it around like week 14. I'm thinking we'll probably see Shador, and I think we could potentially, seasonal wash or not, see him just close out the rest of the season.
Yeah.
Because that was their hot draft pick, right? That was the guy that they wanted to see kind of orchestrate the offense potentially for the future. So again, so many questions, but this isn't the year for him.
Yeah, so that is it for the AFC North. All right, guys, we got one more division left. Let's break down the fun AFC West, where the most recent AFC Championship Chiefs reside. So, take it away.
We got the Chiefs winning the division again, 11-6.
Okay.
Got the Broncos coming in second, just behind at 10-7.
Okay.
I've got the Chargers third at 9-8.
Okay.
And I've got the Raiders in fourth. Marcos at 6-11.
We're pretty close.
Really?
Yeah, we're pretty close.
I'm shocked.
We have all the same teams. So I have the Chiefs at first at 12-5, Denver second 10-7. I have the Chargers third at 8-9.
Okay.
So and then the Raiders have 7-10. I don't know. The Raiders at 7-10. I have them at their ceiling. I think that's the most you're gonna get. They have fun pieces. Mm-hmm. I like the Geno Pete Carroll pairing. Obviously, that's Seattle, right? So, Genty, can this O-line, surprise people? It hasn't been the best experiment yet, but maybe if they can put together a couple good games, it'll help Genty. And obviously, we like, Brock Bowers is inserting himself in the top 3 tight end conversation already. So it's, it's one of those things where
I like Brock.
They got good pieces and they have crazy Crosby over on the other side. So I think that, they got a fun team. They're going to be one of those teams that you're going to want to watch, and they're going to make some fun plays. And they have their weapons are interesting. Everyone's hyping. Jacoby Myers again, solid wide receiver 2 on most teams, but he's been the number 1 here for a while. He's just been sticking around. So you got him, and then they're really hyped on Dante Thornton, I believe is his name. Just a super tall, fast guy. He's like 6'5", 6'4", but he can run like a 4.4, and he's like one of 3 dudes apparently in the NFL entering the league who could do that. But I'm not going to be totally out on the Raiders. I like what they have, so I think they'll be a fun watch.
Yeah, I think it was you can call it a W off season for the Raiders. I think they retooled and they got a lot of good pieces. I think Pete Carroll as head coach is okay. It's okay. It'll get you by. I don't think he's the long term. I really don't.
Sure. Yeah.
But that is part of why I would say there's potential for them, to get like 7 wins here is just from the Pete. I don't want to say magic, but just the Pete effect, right?
No, I think they call it magic.
I don't want to call it magic. Yeah, I don't want to call it magic. But he brings over Geno Smith as a quarterback. Obviously drafting Ashton Jinty was a great move. That was a guy that I was high on, right? It's a guy that I would have loved to see in a Shanahan system. It's obvious this team has improved and they'll look to continue doing so. When you step back and look at this team, you think, wow, they've got some pieces, that can definitely win them some games. But then you remember that they are in the AFC West.
Yep.
And they went 0-6 in their division last year. And I know it was a different team.
Yeah.
But there's something to be said too when you're going against the Raiders and you know what the Raiders have been for so long, and you just got to play your game and things will kind of pan out. So this team is, probably going to be slept on a lot of this year, which is probably a good thing. I don't think they're going to necessarily shock people, but if they do, I will be one of those people.
Yeah, it'll be surprising too. We talked about, strength schedule, rest disadvantage. They have the worst rest disadvantage, and we talked about this before the pod. Yeah, they have a minus 19, so
that's crazy.
That's the most. And obviously, the Niners were put in a worse situation for a couple years before that, but they've been trying to make it a little better. But yeah, the Raiders kind of got screwed a little bit on this one, so you're going to see plenty of short weeks for the Raiders, and on teams coming off buys, you're going to get rested opponents. So I think again, it just doesn't favor them. They got young pieces, and Pete Carroll's he signed on a 3-year deal. They are trying. You got Brady in the front office, Spytech or whatever his freaking name is for the GM. But there's a sense with especially them bringing in Carroll to they're trying to be a serious organization again. And I don't, not that Antonio Pierce wasn't. I think there was just a level of inexperience to Antonio Pierce. He was a leader of men, but definitely not a force multiplier as a coach. Where Pete Carroll, a proven Super Bowl winning coach, is definitely a guy who immediately elevates their floor from a fundamentals perspective. So I think that energy is going to help revitalize this team, even if he isn't the one to get the job done in the future. But I do think that he's going to be a great stepping stone to an even brighter future for the Raiders, especially if Brady continues to have an influence in that as an owner. So it'll be fun to watch for them.
So let's talk about our BTB year 2 third team.
Yeah.
Of last year in the Chargers. Again, I had them 9-8. You had them 8-9.
Mm-hmm.
So let's kick it off with the guy that my team moved on from pretty quickly, probably too quickly, being backup quarterback, and I think that's going to come into play throughout this season. Trey Lance has had a really good preseason showing, and I think he's starting to kind of show what he's capable of. Show something that he was never able to show with a team like the 49ers and a team like Dallas, where he just wasn't given the proper opportunities. So I really like what I've seen there. Time will tell with that. I think he'll get time this year because I don't expect to see Herbert out there for all 17 games. I don't think we've seen a season of Herbert for all 17. I could be wrong, but
I know he's played through stuff, but yeah, he has missed time.
He gets banged up. So that's bound to happen. But to have that backup quarterback in Trey that can hold the offense now, if he can continue doing that against true starters, you're in good shape. So I like that. But as it sits, they have Justin Herberts and the quarterback whisperer in Harbaugh. Offensively, Herbert will need to lead this young and hungry unit. And I'm looking at the rookies like Amari and Hampton, Trey Harris, Keandre Lambert-Smith. The O-line should be better this year, but the question now for me is how good is this team defensively?
Mm-hmm.
And that's, can they play at the same level that they did last year is where I'm kind of playing with this at. And last year they looked good. I liked watching this team last year. I liked kind of locking in and seeing their progress throughout the year.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that they got better defensively.
No, I agree. I think they're and the reports for what I'm hearing about the Chargers from other podcasts I've listened to, they reference the Chargers defense as the results that they're showing. First in yards allowed and stuff like that. They said that it was kind of a fluky stat for them. And yeah, they lost talent along the board, and it's going to be a matter of can Khalil Mack stay healthy, Derwin James, can those guys consistently stay healthy throughout the course of the season, which they just haven't been able to do as they've gotten older. I'm more concerned about everyone's favorite All-American quarterback, who's apparently better than Jalen Hurts, Justin Herbert here. But I'm worried about him because, yeah, their offensive line, they had a Mekhi Becton who's been dealing with some injuries during camp, but they also lost their starting left tackle, Rashawn Slater,
Yeah.
who they had just paid big money to as well. So, like, you invest in this player who you believe in, and he goes out for a season-ending injury. They still have talent along the offensive line, but, like, there is a difference when you have, when four out of your five starting linemen are capable starters who can hold their own versus 3 out of the 5. Like, in that kind of position in the offensive line, it makes a difference. You see it. So it will be interesting to see now. I know they're switching Joe Alt around to try to mitigate some of that, but I am curious to see, like, just how good Herbert looks. I think, it's so weird. Me personally, I never viewed Herbert as this insanely awesome quarterback just because of the results that have happened. He's been on the losing end of a lot of games. He has led a lot of comebacks, but he's also 3-18 against playoff teams in his career. So it's like, it's hard for me to, the way everybody talks about him, he feels like an empty stats guy to me. So it's just like, it's the same thing with Burrow. It's like, you can look the part, you can do all these great things, but if you're not going to win, and not to mention, when you do get to the playoffs, Justin Herbert, you have two of the worst playoff performances of all time.
Yeah.
Historically bad playoff performances. And, this year, will that change? Will Lab McConkey take another step? Great calling him last year. Like, he ended up being something special. I like what he has. So, like, can he take over? It's great that Keenan Allen's back. I'm glad he's going to end up finishing his career as a Charger. That's a great spot. I love that for him. And we'll see how the rookie does it. Trey Harris, I think was his name, or something like that.
Yeah. Trey Harris.
Their wide receivers. So we'll see. And obviously, with Keenan Allen, it kind of makes Quentin Johnston kind of a moot point for them, because I think they've been trying to kind of get off him. I think he's kind of busted for them, and he's not confident. He's dropping stuff still. Like, it's not going to be, the Chargers is not going to be the right spot, I think.
I'm trying to remember how many years that Herbs has left on his deal.
He recently signed. I think he has like 3 more years still.
Yeah. Because I'm looking at Trey on the bench, man, who's a lot cheaper, and he is younger.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking, like, if the worst things happen this season and it doesn't go your way, and you're looking at this expensive quarterback in Justin Herbert, and you're like, is this really our guy? It draws questions. Like, is Trey up next?
I think the only counter I have to, like, kind of pump the brakes on Trey is Harbaugh loves Herbert. He's in love with that guy. It's crazy. Like, the way he's, like, the creepy pictures they have of freaking Jim Harbaugh glazing and just staring at Herbert from a distance. Like, he's obsessed with him. So I do think this is a great spot for the Chargers, because I do think they're going to be able to get a trade piece out of Trey. I think, the thing about Trey is, for the Niners, they had to pivot off him with the injuries and everything that happened, right? And the success of Purdy, like, it just happened that way.
They didn't have to pivot off him, but yeah.
But, like,
I feel you.
For the vibes and everything, I just think at that point in time, they made the decision, right? Just like Anthony Richardson, they kind of made their decision with him. Bite the bullet. And I think Trey will get an opportunity somewhere, because he's young enough, and he'll have now he's on the path of, like, the Geno Smith arc, where it's going to take him a minute. He's going to travel around a couple teams, and then he's going to get a chance to start, and that'll be his opportunity. Will he be in LA? I don't know. They have a really good QB room. Like, Herbert, Heineke, and Trey Lance is a very competent QB room. So I do think that, like, if Herbert were to go down, I think Harbaugh does feel confident with either one of those guys coming in there and running the offense. And so I think the Chargers, with their potential inconsistencies, because we don't know what their defense is going to look like you said, like, they've had some movement. Can they stay healthy? With their offensive pieces kind of, getting hurt, can they stay healthy? Can that O-line hold up enough for Herbert? And that's kind of why I view them as like an 8-9 because if they have their fully healthy offensive lines, it's a completely different team. And I don't want to pretend like Herbert has all these weapons compared to all these other quarterbacks. Like, I want to be fair, but I'm tired of him being like everyone's favorite quarterback when he hasn't done.
It's fair.
And the only stat you have to tell me is like, oh, he's thrown for the most yards in in the first 5 seasons. Okay, that doesn't do anything.
No, I get it.
So, you like how tall he is and how he can throw a ball 60 yards. That's great, but give me a guy who can win.
So a little bit of a hot take before we move on here, and that's that I'm going to kind of bounce off what you said about Trey Lance getting an opportunity somewhere else? The Browns.
Oh, that'd be interesting.
That'd be interesting.
If they don't like the Shador experiment, you could say the Browns. You could say maybe Indy. I think when you look at maybe Miami if they want to bail off Tua, and start over again. Unlike the NFC, there's a couple teams you could maybe do New Orleans too. I'm sure Kellen Moore would trade for him, right?
Yeah, honestly though.
So there's gonna be an opportunity for Trey.
Yeah,
the preseason is a cool spot for all these second stringers, right? Because it was all Tanner McKee popped off in the first game, and everyone's like, "What's Tanner McKee worth?" So it's that's what preseason's all about. Is find guys kind of revitalizing their careers a little bit, or trying to show that they belong. So I think Trey always needed more of a runway. So
yeah, that's fair. So let's talk about the Broncos for a minute here.
Yeah.
I'm gonna actually toss it over to you, and I'm gonna start with a question. Contend?
No.
Why?
I think they're the same. I think their defense is going to be really good. I think everyone's favoring them to be the best defense in the NFL for good reason. They have the continuity, they have the talent, and it's scary what they have. I think their defense is going to be stellar. Offensively, they're a solid team. Offensively in the offseason, they didn't do much.
Yeah.
So to just expect them to take this massive lead, sure, Bo Nix could marginally understand the game better and play QB better. So yeah, maybe he's not making as many mistakes, and that will help this team. But I do think there's an element of if you're gonna tell me what if the defense isn't working for you that game and it's time for a shootout, I don't trust Bo Nix to win in a shootout yet. They got dog walked by the Buffalo Bills in the playoffs. That happened. So I do think that they were clearly a tier below these contenders, and I don't think that they did enough to elevate themselves to that tier. I think they're a good team in the AFC. I think they're going to be. They are at the top of that next tier. Them, the Bengals, are probably the two most competitive non-contenders in the AFC. And so I respect the Broncos like that. I just kind of want to see it again from Bo Nix. I want to see him maybe sling it a little bit more, or maybe just continue with consistency. He had a good rookie year, so you put up slightly better numbers, and you're going to be a good team.
Dude, I mean, he would be the story going into the season if Jaden Daniels didn't have the season he had last year.
Right.
I agree. I don't think they're a contender yet. I'm not going to laugh at people's takes who call them contenders, because I get why you can say that. They're a playoff team, and they got all these new guys, re-signed some of the key guys. They went out and got the solid pieces like J.K. Dobbins, Trent Sherfield, Evan Ingram, Dre Greenlaw, Talanoa Hufanga. Where I'm stuck at is, while you got those really good guys, and I'm gonna look at Dre Greenlaw and Talanoa Hufanga. I love Dre. I love Hufanga. I love Dre a little bit more, a lot more. Can they stay healthy?
Right.
And that, that's going to be the biggest question. And for me, I don't trust that, and while I trust other guys in these other conversations that I've had, it hits a little deeper and a little closer to home with Dre and Hoof, because I've seen these guys on the Niners and not make it through a full season, and they've been banged up, and they've had catastrophic injuries where they've been out the remainder of season or an entire season. So these are guys with deep injury histories. Last year, the thing that gets me is this Broncos team lost 6 of 7 games all within one score.
Yeah, that's a great point.
6 of 7. So if you do have health here, and these key guys who you've re-signed step up in bigger ways, and these guys who you've brought in are consistent and are incorporated into the system properly, I think you can flip a good number of those games if the same rules apply. If 7 games are within one score, I think you probably flip at least 3 of those.
Right.
So for that reason, I'm willing to say that they have a ceiling of, in my opinion, of 11 wins. And I put them close to their ceiling. Like I said, I have them 10-7, but their schedule is tougher. And that's the part to me where it's I don't know that they're going to have 7 games within one score. I don't know what this team's necessarily going to look like, depending on how well they fare against the AFC West gauntlet that they have to go through. Bo Nix coming off of his really good rookie season is going to be one of the biggest stories to kind of look at and watch this season.
Yeah.
Can he take that step? Is it a leap? Is it, a mound? Does he regress? There's lots of questions to be had with this team. I don't think it's safe to call them a contender by any stretch, but I understand it.
Yeah, and I think if we want to make we want to talk about like the coaching too, like Sean Payton, very consistent coach,
Great coach.
a great coach. But there is something to if you want to do a comparison of past Sean Payton teams, you want to look at those like the late 2000s, early 2010s Saints teams that had Drew Brees and they had this awesome offense and decent defense to
one good season.
Yeah, like they went 7-9 3 straight seasons. So with Drew Brees, a Hall of Fame quarterback, so there is an element to like there is a you can tell me that the Broncos are going to be a contender because their defense is going to supplant them enough to allow the offense to be able to control the game better than other teams. I agree with that. But you could also tell me that Bo Nix takes a step back, the defense takes a step back, and maybe they're not as good as everyone thought they were, and they end up being a middling team. And that possibility still exists too. So the Broncos, I think there's an element of like, same thing with like the Commanders where we're here. We're totally here already. And that doesn't always work that way. The success is not linear. We say this all the time in sports. Success is not linear. So these guys, can they be consistent again? That'll be the key. I do think I'm betting on the Broncos being consistent. I think they'll make it back into the playoffs this year. They do sneak in mine.
Same.
So I think they'll be pretty much the same team as last year. I think they'll be competitive. They're going to be I don't say they won't. They don't want. They're going to be a team that you want to face in the playoffs. Like I'm not going to say that much yet because the Bills again mollywop them. So I think that like they got to prove it to me.
Yeah, and that's maybe this is just more of a building year for them. Well, and you can still make the playoffs and be a damn good team, but get bounced first round and call it a building year, and it's still somewhat of a successful year because your quarterback is young. A lot of your core pieces are young. You're still developing a lot of these players. So the Broncos are doing the right things. There's no question about that. I think they're finding ways to get back into relevancy, or at least more of a relevancy state. So W off season for them. They do sneak in for me. They are my 7th seed in the AFC.
Wow.
So it's literal sneak in for me. But I'll be watching the Broncos this year because a lot of those players hit close to home for me.
Right.
I worked closely previously with an old coworker who he's a big Broncos fan, and he loves Bo Nix. And he talked about like how he watched him in college and he watched him when he got drafted. When he got drafted to his favorite team, he was like super excited, super hyped about it.
Yeah.
And it was a cool little story. But he also, he notices some of his, weaknesses. He notices the strengths, but he notices the weaknesses. And one of those weaknesses, for instance, is there's a certain way he rolls out. I can't remember. It's to his left or his right. He's terrible. Like he almost shouldn't be throwing the football when he rolls out that way.
Mm-hmm.
So it's things like that for Bo that I'm looking at this season. Are you getting better at rolling out, for instance, to that certain direction, and can you still sling it? Because he's capable of throwing on the run, but it's only one direction. I'm pretty sure it's if he rolls to the right, he's good to go.
Mm-hmm.
If he rolls to the left, he's trash. So it's things like that I'm watching for Bo. Bo is another story for me. A lot of these young quarterbacks are one of the stories I'm looking at this year, and one of the things and the reasons why I have these teams either not doing well or doing well because I anticipate them making a step. And Bo, to me, feels like a player who I expect to make a step this year.
Yeah, I think, the Bo Nix arc has been an interesting one. I think a lot of the things about him coming out of college was like he's an older player playing against younger players. He needed 6 years in college, and you're seeing a lot of guys do that. I think you saw like with Dylan Gabriel, the way he played against the Eagles in the preseason game. I saw his experience there, and I do think there's an element for Bo where like he had success. It wasn't like he was there 6 years and kind of struggling, kind of like Tyler Shuck, right? Like, for when he was in Louisville, he only had one good year in Louisville in his 6th year. So it was versus Bo Nix, who's been successful pretty much the time that he took that starting role in Oregon. So I think that like there's an element to Bo where that success will carry over, and now that he's found success in Denver, I believe he can be a consistently good quarterback. I don't know what his ceiling is. I don't, I think that he can be that fringe. He'll be like the Jared Goff range, like a fringe top 10 quarterback at his peak. I think that like, and that's going to be good enough. I think that, that is proven to be good enough if you have a good enough team around him. And if this defense stays as awesome as everyone expects him to be, they're going to be competitive. And he just needs to, be a game manager and control the game and not turn the ball over. And not make rookie mistakes in year 2 and avoid the sophomore slump. I believe in Bo. I think that I like this iteration of the Broncos. I hated the Russell Wilson version of the Broncos.
Yeah.
Because that was the whole toxic thing.
Broncos country.
Yeah, that's right. So Peyton has a QB he believes in. I believe in Bo. I think he's a good kid. So we'll see, we'll see how it ends up for them in Denver.
So Super Bowl hangovers are a pretty real thing.
Oh, for sure.
We saw it with the Eagles a couple years ago. We saw it with the Niners a couple times now. We've seen it with teams historically. Neither one of us believe that the Chiefs are going to have a Super Bowl hangover.
That's right.
Why?
Well, I mean, what happened the last time they got blown out in the Super Bowl?
Yeah.
They went back to back. I think, and this is part of my argument for, whenever we talk about like Patrick Mahomes, the QB, right? These past couple years, they haven't been as strong as a team. Like, they are not as deep of a roster as they were when they were peaking in 2018 through 2021. Patrick has had to do a lot more with a lot less, and the results have shown he's been inconsistent. He hasn't been the Patrick Mahomes, this unstoppable force who makes every decision and it kills you somehow. Like, he struggled, and the team in turn went 15-2 last year.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they struggled. They went 11-0 in 1-score games. So that doesn't seem sustainable to me. And even if it does bottom out to where it's like 7-4 in 1-score games, if they're in that, because they've kind of taken that step now. They're going to be a team that's going to be in 1-score games much more consistently than what they're used to, because they're not an explosive team. They might be an explosive team this year. But the thing is, they haven't needed to be explosive to be good. They have a consistent defense. They have continuity in the coaching staff and the schemes and everything. So they just need to keep dudes in there who can make the plays. And they have talent all over that roster. I like the receiving core a lot better this year. So I have them at 12-5. And listen, they went 15-2 last year. And people were like, oh, but this team's better. Yeah, but again, you won 11-0 in 1-score games. That level of consistency, the year you guys won in 23 for the Chiefs, they won 11-6.
Mm-hmm.
They were playing in the first round for the first time in a while. So it's like, I anticipate them needing to take that route in order to find their way back to a 4th straight Super Bowl. I don't believe it's going to happen for them this year, but we'll talk about that in a little bit when we do the playoff things. But Kansas City, I think it's undeniable. Patrick Mahomes is unbelievable against this division. Like, that's despite the crappy rosters around him, that's still been the case.
Yeah.
I'm not going to bet against the Chiefs, but I can not bet against the Chiefs and also still bet against the Chiefs at the same time. They will win their division. They will win it for like the eighth, 9th straight year or whatever, something crazy they have. They've been dominating this division. And I think that, they're going to be hungry, and they know how to lose. They know how to win and they know how to lose. Like, this team is balanced, they're calm, cool, and collected, and they're led by fiery, passionate leaders as players. So, like, I respect how much they've won. Even when they lose, they're still a part of one of those successful stretches we've ever seen. And that comes with them even losing. They have an opportunity to make it to 4 straight Super Bowls.
Mm-hmm.
The last team to do that was the Bills back in the 90s when they lost
all of them. Yeah.
So it's like, you're having as much success as Brady and them did, but it's just a longer stretch. So so long as Patrick Mahomes is there, so long as Andy Reid is there, and so long as Steve Spagnuolo is there with that defensive core, they're going to be one of the best teams in the AFC, if not the NFL.
I'm going to get you a Chiefs flag for Christmas so I can put it right above you.
Hey, man, game recognizes game.
No,
I respect winning.
I get it. I get it. This is a tough topic for me because I've seen my team get whopped by the
Right.
Chiefs and the refs. I will always say that, by the
Yeah.
way.
We're gonna have that conversation here.
Oh,
It's gonna
eventually,
be
yeah,
great.
yeah. I've watched it happen now. It's too many times, so it's a tough pill for me to swallow and a tough topic. But we saw Patty and this team bounce back after a Super Bowl loss before. There's no reason to think that this team is going to go through a Super Bowl hangover. They haven't had a vibes-wise negative offseason. Like it's just been business as usual for
Yeah.
the Chiefs. It's not great vibes. You're coming off a Super Bowl loss, but it's not down either because it's like we've won. We've done this before. We can get back. We will be back. It's a matter of time. Like, let's just get to work. So for me, the question lies actually genuinely with Travis Kelce. I wonder if he's capable of staying an entire season healthy. I wonder if he's able to provide the same level of, put this team in my backpack that he's been able to do running with Mahomes. I know that their receiver room got better, but there's always going to be a level with Patty Mahomes where he's going to have to rely on his tight end in Travis Kelce. It's similar to me in the Brady and Gronk thing.
For sure.
Like, Gronk was Brady's, blanket in a lot of ways and vice versa. And I think this plays the same factor and a large factor with this Chiefs team. So how good is Travis Kelce going to be this season is one question that I'm asking. Is he regressing? How quickly is he regressing? Because, you look at these tight end lists and he's falling down.
Oh yeah.
Whether it's, true or not, or opinion based or fact based, that leaves a whole different discussion. But, the recognition that he's not the same player he was 5 years ago, for instance, is there. And that is a fact. It's a matter of, is he good enough to still put a team and put a drive on his back when they need him to? And, that amount of games that they won last year, the 11 games, what was it, 11 games?
Yeah, 11 games, one score games.
1 score
11
games
and
is
0.
insane. You just can't repeat that. I will be shocked if they do.
Don't want to
Let
say
me say
impossible,
that.
right? Yeah.
I can't say anything's impossible with this team anymore. The offensive line leaves questions. Obviously drafting Josh Simmons. They love what they're getting out of Josh Simmons early. It's a matter of, is he going to look good against starting caliber, top end, top tier defensive lines in the NFL? And that's the part that, leaves some questions. Kingsley Sumiata is a serviceable left guard, but, after playing left tackle last year, you kind of wonder if he's in the right position. Yeah. So I think this position that he's in now is a little more suited to what he actually is as a player and what he's been known to play. This Chiefs team is not someone you can write off. It's just not. And to bet against them is probably the dumbest thing an NFL fan can do right now, just based on the history and history tending to repeat itself.
Yeah, it's foolish to think, right? It's the reverse of, I want to see them do it again. I want to see them lose first before I write them off. Like,
exactly.
I need to see it happen first. Everyone can, I think like 2 years ago, I wanted to be trendy and bet against them. And they're like, they're not even going to sniff the, I think it was 2023. I was like, they're not even going to, they make the playoffs, they're going to lose first round. And then obviously they make it to the Super Bowl. So it's just like one of those things where Chiefs are undeniable still, and it'd be just because they got whooped by the Eagles doesn't mean that they are all of a sudden a bad team. They were 15-2. They beat all of your favorite teams last year, guys. So it's just one of those things where it's like you can always doubt them, but it is a different feeling when you actually beat them. And that's where, like, even in the regular season, and I think for Bills fans, I think I can understand a little bit. It's like, as an Eagles fan, when we lost that Super Bowl, we had also lost to them in the regular season the time before that. So for me, I hadn't really witnessed, like, can they beat this team? And then when they came close to the Super Bowl, I was like, okay, we're close. Like, I can feel that we can beat this team. Beat them in the regular season. And then when we faced them again this year in the Super Bowl, I was like, we've beaten them before. We can do this. So I think that, like, that's the next step is for fandom, that like these contending teams need to worry about is like, you guys are right there. You can go blow for blow with the Chiefs. Just finish the job. Finish the job. They are always the team that finishes the job. That's been their legacy. And I just wonder if someone's going to end that for them. So and I also think that they could not be the representative this year for the first time since a while, and it still wouldn't be like oh my gosh, like it might be like kind of like the Warriors were, when the Kings won, it's like, oh, Clay's gone, the dynasty over. It's gonna be the same thing, like, oh, Kelsey's gone, it's a new era type of thing. Like that's gonna happen, but I still don't think the Chiefs are gonna regress even after.
No, because they'll still have their Steph Curry. So
Exactly.
yeah, I get that.
Yeah, so I think we got through all the teams here, bro. Like, how you feeling? Do you feel good about your picks this year? Do you think or there's some teams you're like, yeah, this exercise kind of screwed me on them, and I just didn't,
I went through. So we did these picks on NFL Pro
Football Network.
Yeah. So we did this exercise where, and it's fun. You go out and you pick week by week, the games that you think how they're going to shape out and so on and so forth. And you can get crazy. You can say it's score predictions and whatnot, right? I did it 3 or 4 different times, and this was the one I felt the most confident about. And it was funny. I was sitting here and I'm waiting, to kind of start the episode, and I was like, just for giggles, I'm gonna compare it to the win the win totals, the projected win totals for all these teams. And I was damn close on a lot of them. And I was like, this is interesting to see how these kind of shape out, and like hearing your perspective on it, and like how we were locked in on some of these and very tight versus like, a different opinion entirely on some. It's like, it's very opinion based, right? And it's, you can back it by fact, you can back it by gut. The reality is, like, the season's going to play out. We're either going to be really right, really wrong, or, it leaves a lot of questions. So it's a fun exercise. I always like doing these. I'm looking forward to the NFC next week.
Heck yeah. And that's the thing. It's, it's August 20th, 2 weeks before the season starts. A lot's still going to happen. Who knows? Something terrible is going to happen to a player, and it's going to, ruin our entire picks. And, that's just how it goes. But like at this time, at this moment, this is how we feel about these teams. So let's real quick, before we go into some housekeeping stuff with the Eagles and Niners real quick, I just, let's run through our seedings real quick. Just, we're going to go 1 through 7, and just announce what they are in the order they are. And then next week in the NFC pod, we're going to do the playoffs when we have all of our seeds there. So we'll go 1 through 7. So I'll run off through mine real quick. So I have the Baltimore Ravens at my number 1 seed. Buffalo Bills are my 2 seed. The Chiefs are my 3 seed. Texans are my 4 seed. The Patriots are my 5th seed. Broncos are my 6th seed. And the Bengals are the 7th seed.
We're close-ish. So I've got the Bills as my 1 seed. I've got the Ravens as my 2. I've got the Chiefs as my 3. The Texans is my 4, the Bengals is my 5th, the Steelers is my 6th, and the Broncos as my 7th.
So we each had 2. Oh no, the Steelers made it last year. So I have 2 new teams in the playoffs. You have 1 new team in the playoffs this year. But it's pretty competitive based off of the other teams around there. It just probably didn't work out for them, the tiebreaker wise and all that stuff. That's the other thing too. It's like, in this kind of exercise, the tiebreakers are a little because it is kind of randomly generated unless we're sitting there picking all the scores. So it is like, that's a lot of work. So it was interesting, kind of how this lined up. But it was a good exercise for the AFC. I loved it.
Yeah.
All right. So last little bit, final thoughts. We just wanted to touch up a little bit on some of the news that's going on around Philadelphia and San Francisco. So let's start with San Francisco. So Ben, I want to let you take it away. Just any housekeeping thoughts you have before we head out here.
So it's more injuries, and that's the unfortunate part. Obviously, in the game against the Raiders, Dom Pooney got injured, as a lot of Niners fans know now, and that's probably the most concerning injury of them all. Originally, it was reported as like a PCL injury, and that he would be out a few weeks, and then it was later confirmed it's a knee sprain.
Okay.
So he's still out a few weeks. Kyle Shanahan was talking about it. He says there's concern that he'll miss week 1, but we'll kind of see and we'll feel it out. They asked him if there's backups ready. He's like, I mean, of course, right? So that's one to watch. Patrick Taylor was put on end of season injury, as he went down with a shoulder injury. And those, these injuries are driving me nuts, but I'll kind of move quicker here now. The Niners this morning, it was reported, we're recording this Wednesday. It was reported this morning that they are looking for a wide receiver in the trade market. It's about time. And they actually made a move. They went and made a trade with the Kansas City Chiefs, and that trade was a sixth round pick from the 49ers to the Chiefs for a seventh rounder and wide receiver Sky Moore. Now, Sky Moore has been in the league 2 years. He is off the top of my head. He has 45-ish receptions for about 500 yards in his career, one touchdown. And the most recent play from him was the last preseason game on Saturday or Sunday against the Seahawks. He had two dropped catches, 2 drop throws.
Just what you love to hear for a new Niners receiver, huh?
Yeah, but he also has fielded some punts with the Chiefs, and he fielded one in the fourth quarter for the Chiefs where he took 88 yards for a punt return touchdown. So there's I will say there's potential here. I won't say that this is the best move that could have been and was, I'm sure, on the table for the 49ers. I think this was a reserved move. I think this is a move that you anticipate. Obviously, Demarcus Robinson, it was reported that he's only serving a 3-game suspension. I don't know if that's being appealed. I don't know if it's appealable at this point. And if it is, it's likely that it's not changing. So 3 games, I can live with that.
Right.
You'll get him back. You're hopeful to get Juwan Jennings back. Ricky Pearsall, that drive on Saturday. You and I watched it live. Purdy and Ricky locking up 3 out of 4 times with a little miscommunication in the end zone. Like, things look good in the wide receiver room when things are healthy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of the thing that you're looking at this point is like, how do you look in week 1? How do you look in week 3? And then how do you look in week, let's say, 8? Do you have, Brandon Ayuk back? They say week 6 is the target. We've talked about it. I think week 8 probably sounds more realistic as these things go. How do you look in week 8? Do you have all your guys? Because if that's the case, and you have your locker, your wide receiver room there, I guarantee you Sky Moore's not going to see the field. So,
right.
I think it's a good move now. We'll see if he's even on the 53-man come the end of the season or the start of the season.
Yeah, I mean, hey, it's a low risk, medium reward type of move. You need it. You need bodies on the field. It's tough. I want to real quick for the Sky Moore thing. How electric, emotionally was it for you to have Jake Moody come up with? He went 5 of 6 in the preseason game, and I know in practice he went 5 of 5. He's cooking now. Money Moody is returned, right? How did that feel? How do you think that? Do you think, because I know we don't want to overreact all the time to preseason, but I think for kicking it might be a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
Does this establish, in his recent performance in those big moments, establish a confidence in not just, in Moody, but for the team in terms of like, okay, I think he might be back.
Yeah, because everybody recognizes, kicking in football is a lot to do with mental. You are asked to go out and do one job. In a lot of ways, that's always going to be, the phrase when you're talking about a kicker is you're asked to do one thing. So it's like, if you're making your kicks, you're going to get praised. But if you're missing not even, 50, you're not going to miss 50% necessarily. If you're probably not in the NFL anymore. But if you're missing a good number of field goals, you're going to get talked about as being trash pretty consistently by a large fan base, probably by the NFL. And your team is going to lose a lot of hope in you. Your offensive coordinator is going to start going for it on 4th downs. Like, it draws a lot of, questions around the team and that player. For a guy like Jake Moody, who had a great rookie year, his sophomore year was a down year, obviously. And now to go into this and get really what this is a mental booster, right? I think it was massive. I think the 2 field goals at the end to tie it up and then to take the win right at the buzzer. That's everything that could have possibly been perfect and worked out for him worked that way.
Yeah.
And to me, I think, I watched it live. While I don't like him missing field goals, I like Jake Moody. And I think that it's still going to be too early to move on from a 3rd-round pick, especially as a kicker when you don't want to admit to that mistake, even though it's a mistake. But with Jake, I like Jake. I think he's a good kicker. He changed some things up this offseason. He had that great back and forth battle with Greg the Boot before he had to before he, Greg was kicked off, not because of his play or anything, but because we had to get other players.
Right.
So I liked it. I think this is a good thing for Moody.
Yeah, it was exciting to see. I know in the moment we were like, "Oh my gosh, let's hope he does this. This is great."
Yeah.
So no, that's great vibes. That restores the vibe, right? I was thinking to myself, I was like, just add 2 wins to the Niners season, just because like you might have that security blanket back. Where no, it really was Jake Moody that took away a couple wins from you guys situationally, and I just think that if you can just get that reliability back, it that elevates your floor. So
Yep.
that's good to know. So any final thoughts on the Niners before we switch on over?
No, let's go into the last week.
Yeah, so just final thing here. I know we've been going almost 2 hours now. Thank you guys for sticking around this far if you have. So for the Eagles, the Eagles also traded for a wide receiver. They traded for wide receiver John Mechie with the Houston Texans. I forget exactly the compensation we sent. I believe it was a 5th-round pick and a 6th-round pick that were involved.
It's better than the Niners.
And we also traded tight end Harrison Bryant to them as well. He was a bottom of the roster tight end who wasn't probably going to make ours. Same with John Mechie on the Texans. He's had a guy, he had cancer when he first entered the league. And, he's been working his way back ever since, but never really got those reps. He was a 2nd-round pick. And he went to Alabama with Devontae Smith. He missed Jalen Hurts by 1 year, but him and Devontae, Devontae was the first person to message him once it happened. So, you already get that connection there, which is cool. You get a guy who has all these traits back in college and performed well. So, it's a flyer, right? The Eagles did take some injuries today. Johnny Wilson did get carted off the field today. Not exactly sure what it is. He couldn't put weight down on his leg. He was in a pile. So, who knows? It sucks because Johnny Wilson was just coming on and playing really well. And that was the thing. When the Eagles traded for Mechie, we're like, we feel confident in a few of these other guys like Anais Smith. Darius Cooper was making a name for himself. So Mechie, throwing him in there, it's going to be interesting to see what kind of role he actually does have, if he really is a part of the roster, kind of like Sky Moore. So we'll see how that turns out for him. But yeah, so it wasn't just Johnny Wilson. Andrew Makuba did get hurt as well. He tried to push through, I think it was a hamstring, and he tried to push through it, and he had to exit practice. So we'll see. And it sucks because he's coming off of an awesome game, and he was really coming on and taking all these first team reps and looking like he was going to take that job. And, now it's just going to be, he's going to have to come back and work back from that. So we'll see how long that takes. And then a lot of the offensive starters we're seeing, Jalen Hurts has been practicing a lot without his guys. Like he hasn't been practicing with AJ or Devontae or Lane. Friggin' Jordan Mailata got a concussion. He's been banged up throughout camp too, and they haven't really given him much rest, which was interesting too. So, Jalen Hurts had a really good day though, apparently, despite, missing a lot of his talent. So I think it's just one of those things where, I don't want to overreact. And I feel like, Super Bowl hangover in the sense of like the Eagles have been to 2 of the past 3 Super Bowls. They have been to the playoffs 4 straight times. You're making deep runs. This is probably the price you end up paying. Your team, both of the Super Bowl runs, we had 21 of our 22 starters. Like that's just a unprecedented level of health that was bound to regress at some point. So I think the Eagles are seeing some of that. So maybe this is just maintenance. Maybe a lot of these guys, are going to be ready to go week 1, and this is just maintenance. But it's not nothing, and I think it is something the Eagles fans to monitor, because you look at the depth, and you look at guys like, I want to say like 45 to 53, and you're not confident in any of those guys. So the depth really does start to get questioned. So something to monitor over the next couple of weeks. We'll see if the Eagles heal up, but I mean, that's kind of the news right now. But outside of that, cornerback 2 battle, nothing's really happening. And it actually looks like Keely Ringo, who I was high on going into this, has actually lost ground to Adoree Jackson and Jacorian Bennett, and even Mac McWilliams too. So it's kind of a bummer. No one's really separating themselves. So that's still a position that is kind of all, wide open still. And I think Fangio's a little bit nervous about that too. So something to monitor as well. So for the Eagles, it is just, that's kind of been the story for all training camp so far, and it hasn't really changed. So once we get more updates, we'll let you guys know. But next week, it's going to be NFC predictions. So we get to put our stamps on where we think our teams are. So, this was episode 100. Any final thoughts before we hang out here? It was a pleasure actually being able to do this and moving forward. This is going to be the Behind the Back podcast, y'all. Like, this is it. And I think this was a lot of fun actually being able to jive with you in person here, brother. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that being in person, it strikes more conversations, and then we have 2-hour episodes. We'll dial this in a little bit more.
Yeah.
NFC, hopefully we'll go. Obviously, these are going to be longer episodes, but it was fun. I enjoyed this.
Yeah, Bracer, we're gonna go back to our, hour 15 regular stuff here, but these next couple weeks, this week and next week, it's gonna be long. We're talking about a lot of teams. We really want to do, some may be casual opinions, but we do want to give these teams justice. This is a prediction pod. We want to, give our takes for why we think teams are going to be where they're going to be. Then it's fun to have that conversation. So we enjoyed this conversation with you guys. I enjoyed this conversation with you, brother, as always. So this was episode 100 of the Behind the Bag podcast, the 100th episode special. Please, you can follow us you can hit us up at behindthebackpod13@gmail.com. For all you guys watching on YouTube and on video, all of the links to our subscriptions are up above. For all the audio listeners out there, the links to the descriptions are down below. Please give us a like, subscribe, rate, review, follow the show. Help us grow in year 3 as we grow and advance and try to get a little bit more creative here in the podcast game. And we look forward to an exciting NFL season. So as always, I am Marcos Conegro. Beside me here, as always, is
Ben the Jet Reds.
All right, y'all. We love y'all. We will talk to you next week.
Peace.